Welcome to Vassals of Kingsgrave, the international spin-off podcast from a podcast of Ice and Fire, where we discuss a range of topics from books, movies, TV shows, Ice and Fire novels, and sometimes anime. The focus of this episode will be the 1986 David Cronenberg reimagining of The Fly, starring Jeff Goldblum, Geena Davis, and John Getz. Maybe some occasional references to the original 1958 Fly, and maybe some mention of the sequels as well. My name is Glen, I am Dagus Rivers from the forums, and I am joined by Matt Shute.
Yeah, hi, I'm Barrick on the forums. So my name is Matthew, and I'm looking forward to discussing the 1986 film of The Fly.
So if any listeners out there are, keep up to date with the latest Vassals of Kingsgrave episodes, and there's a huge range of them, so maybe it's so a huge catalogue that we have at the moment of episodes. We've just done, I think, episode 166 online through the vokpodcast.com website, but we did do, Matthew and I both did an episode, a horror movie discussion, roundtable discussion, and one of the focuses was The Fly, which Matthew, you had chosen yourself, and that's how I had first discovered the movie, and since then I've been obsessed with it, so trying to find any podcast that I can think of, searching iTunes to find some good podcasts to listen to on The Fly, and watch the sequel, watch the original 1958 version, so that's why I thought it would be a good thing to have this discussion, so a more expanded edition where we can talk about a bit more. Whereas the horror roundtable, that was about a 20-minute episode, 20-minute discussion on it at the time.
Yeah, it was sort of segments that we.
That's right, exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's. I mean, I think it's also probably because we hadn't much time to talk about each individual film. We sort of it's probably best if we go into detail about certain ideas that we would like to share, probably with and maybe get some feedback on the forums if people are interested. So I'm looking forward to that.
So far, have you had a chance to listen to the horror movie roundtable episode?
Oh yes, I actually listened to it when it came out. Immediately after, I sort of also I shared it on Facebook with other people,
good.
But no one replied. So
no one replied.
I don't know. Probably no, because it was a very long podcast. The uncut version was probably about 4 hours, right? So we were. Despite the fact that we weren't able to discuss most of the films in much detail, I guess we talked for a very long time. So.
That's right, I did hear that it did go on to over 4 hours with once you discussed all the 6 movies, and then you did also discuss things like zombie apocalypse, is that right?
Yes, we did, and I sort of mentioned my growing fatigue of horror of zombie films, but that's for a different podcast. And yeah, we sort of discussed sort of other ideas that sort of come out of horror films, because we like to not just discuss the plot, but also what do the ideas mean behind it, and what does the imagery tell us. And I like to have those kinds of discussions, because basically that's what I think cinema is for. It's sort of a jumping point into a big debate about interesting ideas.
I was amazed with the outcome of that podcast, so after listening to it, so Duncan did a really good job at editing the podcast. You were saying that it was over 4 hours, the recording session, but you managed to trim it down, taking away some unnecessary conversations, and bringing it down to 2.5 hours, a nice 2.5 hour discussion. So it was a good edit of the podcast. Yeah,
it was. I think it was Greg, Claudius the Fool on the forums who edited it, I think.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, I wasn't the editor on it. I just heard that I was actually myself really surprised that he managed to do it in time, because I was also thinking, he's got about 5 days or something like that to edit a 4-hour podcast into 2 hours roughly. And I noticed, it's also usually a very seamless edit. So you don't notice when unless you've been on the podcast, you don't notice that things might have been cut out. So I think he did a very good job.
I think it was just because maybe Duncan had posted it online. Maybe that was it. But well, kudos to Greg for producing that podcast, editing it down, of course, and the whole arrangement of the podcast.
Yeah, and so I don't know. What did you think that? I mean, what made you interested in the film when we talked about it? What was the quintessential idea that sort of spoke to you about it?
That's right. It was the standout movie of all 6 movies. So of the movies that we were discussing during the podcast, I had already watched maybe 2 of them, but then watched another. I think 3. I think I watched. Let's see. I did watch The Fly for the first time. I did watch The Omen for the first time, and I think I also watched Silence of the Lambs. I have watched that before, but it's been a long time since I've watched it, so watched it again to refresh my memory of the movie. But I think The Fly stood out for me, maybe because I haven't watched. Well, I've already watched Silence of the Lambs before, but I just was intrigued by the concept of the story, the gradual progression of the story as well, the fact that they take their time with the story and really develop the characters. I also liked the minimalism aspect of the story, so it's 3 central characters, maybe some small supporting roles, but it's really the focus is in the 3 characters, so Jeff Goldblum, Geena Davis and John Getz, and I like how it also ends with those 3 characters in a big standoff as well.
It's a really tight narrative, I think, and that's what helps it actually. Because if it were a bigger cast, then you might risk losing a bit of the oomph behind maybe a bit of the oomph behind the ideas. So it's probably the best way to actually also maybe showcase the differences between Jeff Goldblum's character and Geena Davis's ex-boyfriend in the film, who it's sort of like you have to sort of take notice of you can't take notice of many other characters, so it's actually helpful in the way that the characters progress over the rest of the film. So you are sort of you're noticing it much more because you spend time just with these 3, so it's actually quite useful. So shall we maybe?
Well, we can briefly discuss the plot of the movie, of course. So with the movie, it does start off with oh yes. So I guess the main crux of the story is the fact that it starts off with Jeff Goldblum, who is a recent Nobel. No, I think it's mentioned in the movie that he did win a Nobel Prize when he was 20 years old. So a young Nobel Prize winner, physician, scientist, who's also afraid of vehicles, and he does get motion sickness, so he's inspired to invent a teleportation system. And after some horrific experiments with his pets or animals that he's tested out on, a baboon exactly, he also tries it out on 2 steaks, does a little test with that, and then it's so the whole process is the breakdown of the atoms, so disintegration of test A, then in test B it's reimagined, or then that's right, so I forgot what I was going to say.
So he sees so he meets Veronica Quaife, who is played by Geena Davis, right? And so she's writing an article for Particle magazine. And so he it says they provide the company sort of a Bartok Science Industries provides funding, so she's sort of at a meet the press event, right? And then that's where sort of they sort of meet up, right? It
seems suspicious to you that he highlighted Geena Davis as the person he told the story to, almost like it was a plan, like a sort of a pickup line or a chat-up line that he told this one girl who doesn't seem to have any credentials or academic acknowledgement, or in any way, it's not like he's worked with this person before.
No, but I guess it's because because obviously she looks like Geena Davis, so she's a bit.
True.
She's invited. She looks like probably an inviting person, and also probably because, yeah, maybe he's a bit maybe he's a bit shy, and so yeah, I guess the idea of the pickup line is actually quite good because he's a bit of a recluse, so he doesn't probably have much company. And so telling it to someone he might want to tell it to someone who he thinks he can impress and get something else maybe out of it. I don't know. Seems
Wink,
like
nudge, nudge.
Yeah, something like that.
I did like the exchange where she's walking away, so she wants to speak to other people in the party, or do some other interviews with other people at the party, and then he says, "Oh well, they've not invented a machine to save the world or change the world," and she says, "Well, they say they have." She says something along those lines.
Yeah, it's a sort of like she sort of says what it's something that also applies to him, right? Because he then says, "Well, I have." It's like he sort of makes the because he wants to. At that point it becomes clear that he wants to impress her, right? So it's just like, yeah. But actually, yeah, that's quite true because when she obviously is not there she's there for her job, right? And so
that's right. To find a story for the magazine, like the next edition of the magazine.
Yeah. So that's probably, at least she has a focus. That's also probably something that the thing that happens to him in the film is actually probably also a result of his carelessness, and so she's very focused on her work. So on her on doing her job right and not getting distracted necessarily. And so I think the first impulse that she has when he tells her about it is partly because it's probably because she thinks, okay, I can write an interesting article about this. It's still connected to, because she still has she's still focused, at least initially, on what she has to do, right? And so he mixes both of them together, and that later doesn't bode well for him. So I guess that's I just thought it was maybe something interesting to see, because he doesn't know how to separate the two, which is why he later suspects her of leaving him for her ex-boyfriend. And she actually goes to confront her ex-boyfriend, who is also working on the same for the same paper that she does, at least as far as I remember. So
I think he is her boss.
Yeah,
he actually sent her to the party in the first place to get a story for him for the next edition of the magazine, Particle magazine. I think his job title is I think head editor of Particle magazine, when he introduces himself to Jeff Goldblum at the beginning when he shows up to their office.
Yeah, he's her editor, I guess, and his name is Stathis Borans.
That's right.
So I guess that then he's sort of in a position of maybe in a hierarchically dominant position, right? At least in her job, right? And so it's just makes it a bit. He seems like a creep for at least at the beginning.
Half the movie.
Yeah, for half the movie. In the second half, he sort of becomes much more sympathetic. But it's a nice inversion of the status quo, right? That this sort of event changes the characters, changes them around, because Jeff Goldblum, at least, because he's Jeff Goldblum, like he looks like actually he could be. It's a strange thing, because he looks like much more attractive than probably someone who thinks of a scientist would think a scientist would look, but at the same time he also has this kind of, I don't know, he seems a bit like has a nerdy aspect to him, like this sort of I think it's also a speech pattern that helps give the performance more nuance and
Oh yes.
believability, right? Because he's stuttering sometimes, and he's sort of like making. I mean, which we now know is sort of what became his shtick after Jurassic Park. But at the same time, it's something that makes this character much more believable. Which is why I still think it's his best film. So he's good in Jurassic Park, but I don't think that he's this good. And so yeah, this guy seems like a very very introverted maybe or isolated person who doesn't talk to a lot of people. And so when he gets out, he sort of is drawn to the attractive woman who is maybe wants to see his big invention and who he thinks he can impress and yeah, I think that's actually what's going on here. Do you have any? I mean, do you think there's something else on this scene?
With the initial scene, well, when he,
Yeah.
oh yeah, the way that the movie starts with the party, and of course it starts off with the conversation between Geena Davis and Jeff Goldblum talking about their invention. Then eventually he says, "Why don't you come to my apartment and see it?"
Yeah.
And I'm sure she's thinking something suspicious is going on as well.
Yeah, if you said that, if a line like that were in a film today, you would immediately assume, oh, stalker, right? Like the sensibilities are much more heightened today, I guess, in that context. So, or maybe, yeah, because it's probably something like, oh yeah, this weird guy talks about an invention that he's made, and so yeah. Today, I guess it would seem a bit more, a bit weirder than when it was back then, I guess. But it's yeah, I just think. I usually don't like to think that way, but I guess that audiences today would not react the same way than they did back then, just because yeah, we're much more stalker sensitive today, and yeah, I just it's very interesting in the way that the film hasn't. I mean, the film has aged, at least in the sense of the clothing and the haircuts, and yeah, I guess it's very much an 80s film, but at the same time it's still a great film because it has these ideas that are very very yeah, they are very permanent, and yeah, they stand the test of time. So I like that about it.
It's a story that can resonate with a lot of people, even modern audiences, so I think that's why it's still popular today.
Yeah.
Speaking of modern audiences, have you heard of any? I've been hearing a few rumors, or maybe like in development hell over the past few years, that there was plans for a remake of The Fly, but also directed by David Cronenberg as well.
Oh, I read about it. I think it was not necessarily. I think it wasn't a remake, but it was meant to be a sequel of some kind.
Oh, a sequel.
It's in development hell. So I guess because what I read was that Cronenberg sort of went to Fox for the sequel, and yeah, they weren't too into what he came up with, but they still were like sort of into the film. But he said that the reasons, I mean, he said the film that they thought this was going to be like as for the sequel would be a low budget film, but the reasons that they were interested in the film would require a big budget. So yeah, it's a financial thing, because yeah, I mean, if you look at it, at least the current film industry, like Steven Spielberg's Lincoln had to be, I mean, it very nearly landed on HBO because he couldn't get a studio to back it up. And you think, this is Steven Spielberg, the guy who made Indiana Jones and Jaws and E.T. and all these great films. And I guess for David Cronenberg, it's the same, right? Because studios don't seem to be wanting to back strange and weird small and independent films, right? Because it doesn't make much
financial
money.
risk.
Yeah, I mean that's why usually why I like the Chris Nolan films, because they sort of tend to be at least they allow themselves to be risky enough that they won't satisfy each and every one, and they're still at least trying to make. I mean, it's that's why I think at least it's sort of a one thing to do a film and call it risky and actually making a risky film, right? Because it's at least with a film like this, I don't think you could make it today, because there would be people saying, "Oh well, we don't want to offend anyone," especially with the abortion angle. And yeah, they said we get focus groups to scream down our scream at us for days and weeks on end. So yeah, I don't think this film could be made today. At least not only because the special effects would be digital, which would, I mean, at least it would completely ruin the film, because at least with something like this, you sort of notice when something's digital, because it's so perfect, and usually it's so beautifully made that you don't but that you don't buy it. I don't usually, when I see a film that uses a lot of CG, I don't usually buy that it's actually there, because it looks fake to me. Whereas with practical effects like here, it's actually something that the actor has to wear, or that it's a suit, or it's a mask or something like that, or it's puppets.
That's right. It's more believable.
Yeah, it's because you're filming something that's actually there. The special effects are not the focus of the attention. The special effects usually are there to enhance what is already there. So they're more in the background, which is also why the Lord of the Rings films work so well, because most of the time the special effects don't overwhelm the actors and the rest. And yeah, that's probably why I think the film could not be replicated today, and hence why I don't think the sequel is very likely to happen. Because yeah, people would be too scared, first of all, to so antagonize the fans of the original film, because it's people will probably say, well, it's a cash grab or something. So and yeah, they'll probably also think, well, they can't do this better, because this is already perfect. So you can't make it better than it already is. So I don't see even if it's David Cronenberg, like there's no guarantee, especially if that long a time span lies between the first film and the sequel. There's no guarantee that the director is going to do a satisfactory film. I mean, you can look at the Star Wars prequels, and that's sort of the best example I can come up with right now. I mean, I could also mention The Hobbit, although I don't dislike The Hobbit as much as other people might. So.
Oh yeah, I think it's an unwritten rule within Hollywood that classic movies aren't allowed to be remade, or maybe something happens to prevent the making of them.
Oh, so, yeah, it's probably that, but at the same time, I think there are lots of good films that are being remade. You look at Let the Right One In.
Oh yes,
which was made into Let Me In, right?
That's right.
Or you look at. I mean, I also heard a while ago that they were going to remake Ben-Hur, which is actually, I mean, so it just sounds crazy to me. But I think the fact is that it's not necessarily that classic films, like old films, are being remade, but it's actually a sad reality that good films are being remade, because the directors who want to remake them, they want to feel like, oh yeah, I contributed something to this. I sort of made something that is honoring the original by remaking it. But then I have to ask, why remake it if you like it? Why not remake a horrible film with a good premise that you can actually make something where you can actually make it better the second time around? Which that's why I think, if people want to remake like Trolls 2 or something like that, they should probably do it, because you could have a good idea. You could have a good idea, like a film with trolls, like at least that could work somewhat. I guess it just didn't work when they made it the first time.
I used to be a visitor of IMDb on IMDb DB forums, and that was always the most common complaint about remakes, or discussion threads about remakes upcoming, that why can't they just remake old bad movies, or movies that are forgotten, instead of like the more popular classic movies or good movies.
Because the classic films are already good. The classic films already have a reputation, and
they already have an audience.
They already have an audience, and they are already loved by everyone. Whereas it's probably people, and I count myself among them, think that it's probably a better idea to sort of make something that no one knows about or no one wants to think about because it's so horrible, and make it into something great, because then you can say, well, at least, I mean, the first time they tried it, it didn't work, but at least then someone came along and made something awesome out of it, you know? And that's why I think it's probably a better idea to sort of, in this case, it's not actually, I don't think it's that much of a remake. It's just, it uses the same short story was it a novel or a short story?
It was a short story.
Yeah, it uses the same source material as inspiration, but it's not really a remake of the 58 version, because the 58 version only has the basic conceit that, you know, the guy mixes his DNA with that of a fly by accident, and by the end, sort of, he asks his wife or girlfriend to kill him. So that's the at least as far as I know, it's that's the only two parallels I can see. Other than that, the films are totally different, and it's actually, you know, the focus of the films are also different. So it's you know, because the 58 version obviously is focused on Vincent Price's character finding out what actually happened, whereas in this case we see actually what is happening as it is happening. So it's not the same film being remade. It's actually here this 86 film version puts a different spin on the story, and it also makes the transformation not instantaneous but rather progressive. So it's like an evolution, and that's also something that at least thematically sets it apart from the other version, because the other version was sort of just like, yeah, he can't find a cure, and he's sort of stuck in his current state with a big fly head, you know. And I don't think that there's as much thematic weight to it, especially the way the film ends. Like the 58 version ends really happily, at least for the three characters that we focused on. And yeah, this film is not that optimistic, I guess.
That's right. It's a poignant love story, and it's fatal, because that's right. So it does start off well. But then I think that's one of the most favourite aspects of it, the fact that it is a slow progression or slow decaying process that Jeff Goldblum goes through until he finally loses all his skin, loses all his body parts, and becomes like a massive fly at the end of the movie.
Yeah, and it's also like it's actually really interesting as well, because the 58 version starts out bad with someone dying, right? With someone being found like squished under this machine, right? And then
and it's flashback to find out what happened in the first place. And then there's a few other aspects, like there's the police investigation of what happened as well.
Yeah, which in this case there's no crime like being committed at the beginning of the film or something like that, where you could say, well, we have to bring in the inspector character or something like that, where we have to bring in the police or something. That's much more the first film is much more of a mystery of what happened, and whether or not it's because at least because for a while you sort of think that the mother character is sort of really strange at times. I mean, she's happy about, you know, a very depressing news, and she wants to get this fly with a white head, and yeah, you're sort of thinking, well, maybe she's not maybe she's not completely there. Whereas in this film, we sort of know that this is actually happening. So there's no if or how about. I mean, there's no question that this is actually a very bizarre situation as it is. And there's no need to sort of shroud it in mystery. I mean, the only mystery is what in the end will he look like, or will he be able to cure himself? That's the only question we are sort of trying to answer. But yeah, the film actually is much more realistic and says, well, at some point there's no way he can cure himself, because the computer, for instance, doesn't recognize his voice anymore as he becomes more of a fly. And I just think that this is a much more it's a much harsher pill to swallow, because in the 58 version it's sort of implied, at least at the beginning, that this is actually a Vincent Price story. So it's like he's the main character, and so he's in love. He has been in love with her, and all this time, and then sort of like the death of her of her lover is sort of it's maybe a bit of a freeing aspect to it. Like, it's, oh yeah, well, he got out of the way. Now Vincent Price can move in. It's yeah, it's actually the 58 version has moments of comedy in it, really, like especially involving the young boy. He sort of like where he sits at the dinner table and he says, well, how women are, and then it's like that's the 50s and 60s, right? It's sort of the
that's right. That's the typical leave it to Beaver scene. Like obnoxious cute kids that say the craziest wacky things.
There are no obnoxious cute kids in the 86 version, and the only thing that comes close to it is a big larva.
Oh god!
That appears in Geena Davis's dream, and it's I guess that it's David Cronenberg. Like at least when you think about The Brood, the film that also is a horror film, about giving birth to something, and that film was made when just after he got through a messy divorce, and so he was really angry, and he tried to portray that anger, and so I think that he sort of felt that, I mean, at least the kids in that film are the small characters, let's say, who look like kids on first glance, but they're not really. They are sort of destructive forces in the film. I don't know if you've seen The Brood.
The Brood, no.
Yeah, no, that's a different film, but it's also it's a film that very much presents the mindset of the director at the time when he was making it, because he was really angry about angry with his ex-wife, because she apparently, as far as I remember, she sort of took away the child when he wasn't there. Something it's really, really tragic, but at the same time, there's a lot of that. I guess you could also see in here where the child is not even it's a consideration, because and because the director cares for Geena Davis's character, and she cares for whether or not the kid will actually be a mutant or not. And I just think that it's a film that has a very, very strong emotional core, which sometimes you would think, with sci-fi horror, you don't necessarily get that. It's very much about the people, and not really about the fireworks or the conceit necessarily, right? It's just about decay and illness and all that stuff. And yeah, those are very powerful themes. And I just think that the 58 version doesn't have anything that comes close to it. I mean, the closest that it comes is that, the idea of suicide is being mentioned, and the wife character sort of says, well, you can't kill yourself, and it's I just it's a really it's a product of its time, like just like this one is a product of its time, but it's for different reasons. The only thing is that I'd say, leave the obnoxious kid out of the film, because he just said something that by today, I mean, because of the scene I had mentioned where he says, well, she changed her mind. You know how women are, and that was just sort of something that I found to be like, whoa, really? You're going to say that openly? Which might make, it might make me think that the guy who made the 58 version wasn't probably a big women rights defender. I don't know. It's sort of it's sort of chauvinism that you would today not put into a film, not put in a film, unless you really thought that there was nothing wrong with it, in which case I'd be slightly worried. But it's actually some of it is much more light-hearted than the 86 version.
One thing that I thought for almost half the film when I was watching The Fly, the 1958 version, is that she should really fire that maid, because she has to shout at that maid several times, or maybe it's her housekeeper. Like she's saying, "Don't kill that fly," and then she's almost. I mean, she's trying her best to kill it. She's just completely ignoring, her mistress at the time.
Yeah, it's really. I mean, they are probably looking much more like caricatures of real people, except for once again, except for the lover, the woman, and the scientist. These are the characters that sort of have more nuance to them in the original, and that's why, I mean, when we coming back to the 86 film, these are therefore the main characters of the 86 version, because that's where the conflict comes from. At least, there's a love triangle, and then there's the the dehumanization of Jeff Goldblum's character, and then there's the whole worry. I mean, but at the same time, at least the main female character in this film has an arc, I think, because she has to wrestle with the idea of, do I abort the child because I don't know that it has been, whether it has actually been conceived after he went into the machine or before. And so at least that angle is adequately addressed, because that's something that goes throughout the whole film, and which is sort of also some the lead-in for the climax of the film. So that's much more of a serious issue, whereas in the 58 version, she's just sort of trying to find the fly because she needs to kill it. And it's I don't know, it's probably a case where the remake, to me at least, seems stronger than the original, which is not always the case, right? And so
that's right. It's rare. It's a very rare concept that I guess the first telling of the story, or the first original movie, is, I guess, forgotten compared to the remake or the readaptation of the story as well. In this case,
go ahead.
Oh yeah, like in this case, so they're both based on, that's right, the short story The Fly, but the 1986 version is more remembered than the original, so it's a very rare situation that even though it's not a remake in the same way that, I guess, the recent Carrie was in fact that's, no, I forgot. It's a different situation than a remake anyway.
Yeah, it's a different adaptation. It's a second adaptation of the same material.
That's right, exactly.
It's because the film usually, as I said, usually the '86 film stays away from most of from most of the things that are relevant to the 58 version, down to the climax, because the climax of the original is much different from the climax that we have here. So it's I think it's the idea, just to say what I say one last time, is I don't have any problem with remakes, in general. It's just that I feel most of the time it's used as an excuse to make money on the back of the fans of the original, without adding much to it, which is why some more recent remakes of good foreign films, for instance, like the
Yes.
Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, for instance, or
Yes.
The Right One In, the remakes of those films, or even remakes of English language films like Carrie. I found the remake of Carrie to basically be just an update of the original film, because it's like you have new technology, like you have cell phones and everything, right? Okay, but apart from that, what else do you have? I don't know, nothing. And that's really the saddest thing, is that sometimes they just go into mimicking almost word for word what the original already did, because they are too afraid to step away from it because of the fan base. And that's why I think remaking bad films is probably a better idea anyway, because there are no fans of bad films who will say, "Oh, well, you ruined this masterpiece." No, you didn't. Yeah, but let's. I mean, if we can probably go back and about talking about the next scene.
You've already mentioned the scene of Geena Davis. You think that she's pregnant. She gets taken to the hospital, and she's going through with the birthing scene. And then, shock horror, it's actually a giant laver that she does give birth to. And that's right. Also, a cameo by David Cronenberg as the midwife in the scene as well. And what I was thinking is that he actually, during that scene, like, he's a true professional, that midwife, like this horrific monster or something that he's probably never seen before, like a larva, a woman that gives birth to like a giant larva and doesn't even drop it. Completely professional, keeps it in his hands.
Yeah, I was really really surprised by that as well. It's like, why would you touch that? It's
well, he's got gloves on. On the bright side.
Yeah, I mean, and it's also like, I mean, it doesn't even have a human face or anything. Like, you wouldn't even mistake it for a kid when it came out. It's just like, there's sort of a big like chunk of flesh that's coming out, but it doesn't really have any facial features or anything. It's just like, why would you would be amazed if something like that happened in real life. So it's, I guess
that would be headline news. There would be the reporters outside within like 5 minutes and all this sort of thing. And
and sometimes you would. I mean, it's I don't know if I mean, at least it's not done regularly, I guess, when you have like people with really strange conditions. Sometimes they sort of have a glass window where people can watch as the operation is being performed or something like that. It's our medical students that come to examine. It's just, they come to study the procedure and everything, and how would you do that, and so on, and taking notes whilst the doctors are doing their handiwork. So it's I guess if the gynecologist and the gynecologist in this scene was trying to maybe show it to one of the students outside, saying, we got this, but what do we do with it now? But at the same time, it's revealed it's just a dream, right? So it's
a dream.
It's a nightmare.
I'm not sure if you've noticed. Well, I'm not sure if you read about this or maybe seen the pictures, but there was this big news story from maybe 6 years ago. I'm not sure, it could have been like up to 10 years ago, but there was I think, a baby girl born maybe in Pakistan, maybe somewhere else, but Pakistan rings true to me. But she was born and she had 8 limbs.
Oh wow!
Like
I didn't hear anything about that. No, that's yeah, it's weird. But yeah, it's just like it's probably like like Siamese. It's probably something like Siamese twins, maybe and something where they have where they join. So I think the famous twins. I forget their name. They were joined like at the hip or something, right?
Oh yeah.
And yeah, I mean things like that. That are genetic defects. Those things can happen, but it's
exactly.
really really rare, and usually the children don't live that long when there are really severe genetic defects. But at least people like John Merrick are people who had a rare genetic disease, I guess, or genetic defect. I should rather say so. Yeah, and yeah, they lived for at least for a considerable amount of time. So it's yeah, I wouldn't discount it. It's just that I haven't read up on it. So this is completely new to me. But yeah, I guess. But if we're going to talk about the dream sequence, we might as well mention what the deleted ending was, right?
Oh, I still haven't watched that. I know that you posted it online or sent a link out for it, but I still haven't watched that ending. So I have heard about it. So
the butterfly.
A butterfly, yes. Well,
yeah,
also a similar scene is in The Fly 2. We were talking about that, before we started the conversation. But during the Fly 2, it starts off with a similar scene, but it's in real life because it's the sequel. But with fake Geena Davis that gives birth to a cocoon, a massive cocoon. Then they break it open. There's all this blood, guts. It's quite a disgusting scene, but they break it open and then out pops a baby.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's as far as they wanted to go with it. I guess it's not because then you couldn't have the fly too, because it's if it was just a butterfly, then you would have to call it butterfly 1 and not the fly 2. And yeah, just the idea. It's actually. I guess I would call it neat if it hadn't been, I think, attempted before. If I'm wrong, but it's still. It's just sad that the film itself, from what I hear, is not that great. So
it was okay.
Okay. No,
it's okay. It was decent. Average. I didn't hate it, but it was. I guess some of the special effects, some of the makeup leave a bad taste in your mouth after watching it.
Yeah, and that's probably, at least from what I hear, what happens to the main bad guy of the film. It's also I don't know. It's like it's a bit gratuitous, I guess.
Yes.
But yeah, so but yeah, that's not. I don't know enough about that film to talk about it. I guess it's what I tried to say, but
one thing that just annoys me is the fact that so the story centers around Geena Davis, who didn't want to come back to The Fly 2, understandably, but it focuses on her son that she gives birth to. And he wants to find a cure to his disease during the film, but so
they would say, just be yourself, boy.
No.
But just be a fly. We can feed you milk every day.
But you're making a sequel to The Fly 2, and one of your main stars doesn't want to come back. So Geena Davis is too busy with Beetlejuice or whatever, a League of Their Own perhaps at the time. But it always annoys me that they didn't approach Tawny, that Jeff Goldblum has sex with. So that would make that would at least get her back into the movie. So I always thought maybe she could have got pregnant as well during that scene. And
but I guess that was sort of the point of the scene in at least the 86 version, that Geena Davis's character, arrives just in time to save her from getting.
They definitely had sex, but she just saved her from going through the teleportation device.
Oh yeah, that's true.
I always think there's an untold story there, like what happened to Tawny after that, but it's not explained.
No idea.
That's right. It's not explained, so I guess we just think it's irrelevant. That would just be that would solve the sequel problem that they had, where they don't have to have, I guess, a new actress played Geena Davis within the first 5 minutes. They could just bring back Tawny and explain that she got pregnant, and maybe have some. But then you couldn't get John Getz back into the story, I guess.
That's something, but. I don't think you could have gotten him back though.
That's a spoiler though. So the actress that plays Veronica in the sequel dies after childbirth in Fly 2.
Oh, okay.
And then that's right. Eric Stoltz plays the son. His name is Marty or Martin, and he's being raised by Bartok Industries and being experimented with or tested all through his life.
But yeah, the thing is that I haven't seen the films.
Yes, I know.
So I can't really comment on it. So it's
I just felt it seemed relevant with the birthing scene, that there's a similar scene in The Fly too.
I mean, the idea of the cocoon sounds interesting, but it's also something that is reminiscent of a deleted scene from Alien. I guess, where in Alien. They sort of find the crew, or at least the captain of the ship at some point, in a cocoon where he's sort of like bodily. I mean, he's sort of made into something else, I guess. But they didn't go with it in the final film. So, but yeah, this sounds very. I mean, it makes me think of that. So the birthing scene. I guess lots of people were at least relieved that it was
just a dream.
Just a dream, right? So it's because I guess if you were to be responsible for a big larva as a that wouldn't. I mean, because if they were to be as bold as to go, if they actually wanted to make it part of the story and really go through with it, like as part of, then you would have to sort of take into account the fact that she has now to care for a big larva, and that's just,
I don't think she would be allowed to leave the hospital with that.
Yeah, that's just too icky for some people, probably.
I think would be killed as well, or maybe sent away to a research industry.
Yeah, and the I guess another famous scene in the film is, at least the Brundlefly, like his natural history museum or something like that.
Oh yes,
where
all his body parts are kept in the cupboard, like the bathroom cupboard.
Yes, which is also quite sad because he's keeping them. It's sort of a reminder of what it used to be. But he's also saying that he's losing his compassion, right, and his empathy as he becomes more of a fly. But at the beginning, at least, he doesn't know what's really happening to him. And he's, at least, there's a famous scene where he loses the ear and he says, I'm scared, and she hugs him, and it's actually really touching because, despite the fact that you just saw a guy like pull his ear off, it's like, you don't even think about it. It's probably closest. I mean, we talked about the idea of illness and disease being part of the film's fabric. And this makes me think sort of leprosy, especially, because he has to use canes to walk sometimes.
Yes.
And that's actually, that's why I think, and Cronenberg said it himself. He said, the film wasn't necessarily meant to be just about AIDS. It's just that at the time when the film came out, like people were, like AIDS was something completely new, and then sort of people just associated the film with the film's themes with that specifically. But he said it's not about AIDS in particular. It's just about illness and the body and the diseased body, because that's that's sort of been part of his horror film history, that he sort of focuses on the deterioration or the evolution of the human body, and what it's capable of. I don't know if you've seen Rabid.
No.
It's about this woman who is a vampire, but in a really, really strange and weird way. Like there's this sort of, I don't know, like a sting is like that comes out of her armpit, and so that's how she manages to suck people's blood out. I mean, to suck people's blood, because she sort of like stings them with it. Like it's a dart. It's a dart sort of thing under her arm, like, and it's really weird, and those sort of that's part of Cronenberg's sort of thing.
So that was directed by David Cronenberg. Rabid.
I think it was.
Oh, okay.
It's sort of always mentioned when you talk about Cronenberg, but they're written and directed by him, so I guess he sort of, and especially with this film, it's actually really, really interesting that at some point he just accepts the fact that he's turning into something else, right? Because he at some point records himself eating, right, with the dissolving of his food.
Those donuts.
Yeah. And this is how Brundlefly eats. And it's like, but it's really strange. So he goes through these different, like, he has moods. I think you would say that those are mood swings, sort of, I guess, because it's some kind of a at least at least an adventure, as he called it at the beginning. I think something like that. It's something that at least when he first comes out of the telepod, and he has all these advantages that he thinks attributable to the machine itself. It's actually fairly weird how much he shifts between being interested in what's happening and being afraid of it. And at some point, he's just, when he has the famous speech about, I am an insect that dreamed it was a man, but now the dream is over and the insect is awake. That's sort of more of a resigned feeling to it than anything else, I guess. It's just he sort of sees the fact that he's deteriorating as something that's inevitable, but at the same time, by the end of the film, he still wants to. I don't think that it's also I guess interesting to see that his motivation changes. That he doesn't actually want to cure himself by the end of the film anymore, but he wants to preserve his humanity in some form, right? Even though it's not himself. So he wants to merge himself with Victoria and their child to be the perfect family, and then it's just like it's not really the what the original idea was, right? Because he just at some point has to accept that he can't turn himself back.
I always thought that with the end scene was about bring him and Veronica into like telepathy, and then it would help with his DNA if he goes to telepod B, that he would be more human after doing that. That
Yeah,
he would
sort of.
lose some of the fly genes and gain some of Veronica's genes, so that it was like a process to improve himself.
Yeah, but I guess by the end of the film, it's more about, because he constructs a third teleport. So it's sort of like the two original ones and the third one where they merge together, right?
Yes.
And so I guess that would be the original. That would not necessarily be the same thing as, just going with her through the first teleport and coming out in the second one with some of her genes, right? It's actually, much more, it's much more disturbing that he's actually making a third one where because he wants to mix himself together with her and come out as a wholly different being in the third one. Like I just feel that there's probably the fact that he's that he's losing sort of his mental faculties at some point. It's also probably a deterioration of what I mean. It's you could see it maybe as a corruption of not the soul, but at least the mind and the body. So that his ideas also are corrupted in a different way. Because now it's actually involving other people. Like he's not just trying to improve himself anymore. He's involving the people around him, and especially the people who care about him, in trying to get himself back to where he used to, back to where he was. And I just think that it's not necessarily the same thing. At least that's how I perceived it at the time, where I thought, this is part of the insect, basically.
That's right. It does seem like desperation, that he feels like it's coming to an end, his life as a human. So this was like the last, last attempt at saving himself, or trying to remain more human. Or at this point, he's losing his mind and becoming more insect at this point, towards the end of the movie. Yeah,
and it's also like really the point where the fact that at least you sort of at the beginning you had the idea of, well, this guy is a bit strange, but fine. The ex-boyfriend being the big creep at the beginning now is sort of flipped on its head, because he's sort of made to be first of all a victim of Jeff Goldblum's character, because he dissolves his hand, and then he sort of becomes the hero who saves Victoria. So I think that's also like the juxtaposition of where you thought they were initially, because you thought because Jeff Goldblum, while being a bit of a shy recluse, is still fairly sympathetic, but by the end he's really you think, well, he's turning into this fairly repulsive hybrid creature, and the boyfriend starts out as someone who you wouldn't want to be in the same room with, to actually you want him to succeed. So I like the fact that it basically turns around the situation, but at the same time it's like no matter where you are, it's like Jeff Goldblum's character just can't win. It's I don't know. It's just something interesting that I observed as I was watching the film again.
One hilarious scene that I found in the movie was when, after I guess Veronica sleeps with Brundle, and then she goes to like this clothing store to buy him a suit or a suit jacket, and then Stefus has followed her right there, And then she says, "What are you doing here?" And he says, instead of just saying, "Oh, I just came here to buy some shoes," or "I'm here to buy a new jacket myself," he just says, "I followed you."
Yeah, wow.
Instead of just, which I admire, because he straight away he's upfront about it that he is stalking her.
Yeah, but at the same time, you might say, well, at least he's honest about it. He's not making excuses for his behavior. So
sometimes that's the best way to do it.
I don't know. It's just like, I don't.
If someone's found you out.
He's still a creep, but at the same time, like I mean, we know that they were together before, so
yes,
it's probably something that at least because she's still around him at the beginning of the film, at least in a workplace and stuff. So it's not a breakup that probably that was sort of a situation where they said, well, we were never going to see each other again after this, right? It's sort of like something, let's try to make the best of it and just try to not rip each other to shreds over and probably that's also why he probably feels comfortable following her around and telling her about it in that way, because he just probably thinks, well, she eventually has to come to work anyway. So it's, I guess that's sort of how I perceived it, but at the same time, he's still, not, don't do that. It's not, women don't appreciate you following around. It's not something that is endearing in any way. So but at the same time, he saves her in the end. So kudos to him for shooting out the cables of the telepod. But that's about it.
That's right. It does seem that they've got a good working relationship. That it's sort of similar to, I guess, I was working in an IT company like 2 years ago, and my manager and like the head of the company had a good working relationship. Like he was her mentor back when she was like starting out, and then they've always just seemed to follow each other from job to job. So I feel like that's sort of similar to the Geena Davis John Getz relationship, that he was her mentor or professor in university, and now they're suddenly working in the same company, and he's her editor.
Yeah, I could see that. It's so. I mean, I can see that. It's really something where you. I mean, he seems older than she is.
Oh yes.
That's why it's probably not far off. But even then, it's like, if you are a professor at some point, even though that she's maybe if we go with the idea that he's her mentor and she's his student, so to speak, like even if she's no longer his student, it's like I mean, really strange. Regardless, I guess to a certain point, I guess it's because following each other around and constantly, it's I don't know, I just don't get it. It's sometimes people need space. But and that's also something like Jeff Goldblum's character. He misreads Veronica's initial responses, right? Because he imagines her to dump him for her ex, and he gets drunk, and that's where sort of the problems come in. But he's not really good at social interaction. And he doesn't know how to read other people's reactions, and it's basically someone who is cut off from human contact, sort of being in a position where you can be with this one person forever, and you don't want to jeopardize it in any way, and so what happens by the end is sort of probably also an idea of like, I'm gonna keep you forever and all that sort of thing, even if you're in me, and that's, I don't know, it's really weird.
Oh yeah, it's quite creepy when you say it that way.
That's probably how I mean, he wouldn't think that it was, but it's how it comes across, at least to the audience. should come across as really strange and creepy and not right, because he doesn't leave her a choice, essentially, right? He just sort of says, we're going to be the perfect family, and then he tries to drag her into the machine, and at which point, there's another big scene of the film where she rips his face off, which I found to be, when I saw it the first time, I was really like, how did they do that?
Oh yeah.
Really, he just rips his lower jaw off, and it then just lies down the ground, and then the bug head pushes through the human face, and yeah, it's like and it's actually also it's also extremely interesting because a couple of seconds before he was still able of human speech, right? And then once the head is torn to shreds, he sort of can't do that anymore. He's just like, he's just making like animal noises and all that stuff. So it's really, an abrupt, it's a shocker moment where you are supposed to feel, that's gross. And
most likely where, I guess, half the budget went to on the makeup and I guess the prosthetics as well that they had to develop for that. But other than that, it's a quite simplified story that they go in, I guess, a limited number of locations as well for the filming, and it's just mostly dialogue until this scene where all the makeup, all the special effects come out.
Yeah, it's just a really big payoff, isn't it? Actually,
that's right.
It's a really good payoff. And if we if we go back to the '58 version, I also think that these effects in that film are not, they're not bad for '58, right? It's at least the fly head sort of also, it moves and stuff, right? It's sort of and the big the big claw that he has in the '58 version, and the fact that he sort of keeps his head under the blanket all the time, and it's actually fairly. That's why I think the '58 version is still interesting, because it's fairly different from it's really minimalistic, because I guess they couldn't get a really huge budget for more elaborate effects, I guess, when because you just have a mask and a glove, right, sort of fitting over the hand. That's not much that they had to apply, right? But when you contrast it to the '86 version, in the stages even prior to the big climax, you have to imagine that Jeff Goldblum has to sit there for 5 hours waiting for them to apply all this makeup, and it's really remarkable. And I think there's something that's lost, or that has been lost along the way from this to today, where
with the advent of CGI and eliminating the makeup and focusing on, I guess, CGI effects or computer graphics.
Because I guess if you look at the closest analogy that I can find, which I think we mentioned it when we had the horror film podcast, was District 9, because the main character gets turned into an insect-like alien over the course of the film as well, partly, I guess. But I like the special effects in that film because they felt at least somewhat real and grounded in the environment that the film was depicting. But I know at the same time that this is not the general norm. Like, usually when you have entirely CG creatures, those tend to be really fake looking, and I'm gonna use the Hobbit for that, because the orcs, and maybe I can, you've read the Hobbit, I imagine, yes?
Well, no. But it's on my to-do list, my reading list.
but you know that the at least the first pictures of the guys in makeup who were portraying like the orcs and stuff, they looked actually pretty neat because you actually, you know, you had a photo of a real guy standing there in real makeup, and you know it was actually pretty intimidating. And then you look at the final product and you say, well, these are video game characters. These are from a cutscene somewhere. They escaped from I don't know, Battle for Middle Earth 2 or something. And I just that's probably what save. I mean, and what not it didn't save the film because the film didn't need saving, but it's like the special effects are sort of a big payoff in this because it just sort of it anchors the film in a time where practical effects were really big, like The Thing, where you also have, I mean, which we definitely mentioned in the horror film podcast, where you have the practical effects guys going in and doing all these interesting things, and you know, American Werewolf in London, where you have all these tiny little hairs like had to be you know, glued onto the actor's costume and that sort of thing, and then you have to imagine that, you know, it's really something else. And I feel like, you know, probably the argument is that special effects are cheaper, but when I hear that argument, I always go to the idea that, you know, what would you rather have in, for example, a zombie film, CG blood, or, you know, fake blood that is, you know, at least really there, right? You know, a sort of a red colored goo, like something that you splash onto the actors. And I'd say it's probably much cheaper to just get something and splash it onto the actors, right? Instead of having to draw it on a computer screen and pay someone like big money to do that. It's I don't know. And
it does feel like even though they do focus more on, I guess, spend more on computer graphics or CGI effects, that it doesn't really make a difference to the budget. That the budget would have been the same anyway, even if they went with like traditional aspects. But I guess that would take more work, maybe for the makeup and like creating the prosthetics. Your story about The Hobbit, it reminds me of reading Harry Potter released this book. So the makers of the Harry Potter films released this book called Harry Potter Page to Screen, and it was showing. It was split up into sections. So there was a section on the Chamber of Secrets, and there was one where it was talking about the effects with Dobby, which.
Oh yes. But those effects actually, I think they looked really good for the time.
Oh yeah, I did like the effects, but it just reminded me of this story where they were saying that when the actors are filming the scenes, that it was the director had a ball that was standing right in front of the camera, and he was giving a ball to the actor, and that was what the actor had to direct their conversation to, the ball he was holding at the time.
Yeah, it's you know, it's also something that Kit Harington talks about when he talks about filming Game of Thrones, right?
That's right, when he has to speak to Wolf. Ghost, sorry.
CG. Wait. I heard him say that like he has to talk to a big CG sausage, sort of like it's something that looks like a boar at the end of a stick, and then he has to sort of treat it like a pet, and that's actually probably a really strange experiences, but it's also something that Ian McKellen has like remarked upon when he was filming The Hobbit, that he was complaining that he was basically just filming in front of green screens all day, and that it wasn't real acting to him. And I can understand that, because you want to at least have an impression of where you are. Like you want to be able to feel that you are in the film whilst you're filming it, that you are part of, you know, that the set is real, that the costume is real, that everything else is handmade, and that you can sort of lose yourself much easier when you are in makeup and all that sort of thing, and which is probably also why The Fly works as well as it does, because Geena Davis has to actually react to something that is actually in front of her, right? So she can actually see all the grossness and sort of project a really frightened or disgusted reaction to the camera. And I don't know. I'd prefer it that way, and I'd prefer it if more people went back to practical effects, which is also why I like the Christopher Nolan films, because at least for action sequences, he uses real vehicles and he uses practical effects as much as he can. And yeah, I just hope that people see that and go, well, yeah, why did we change what wasn't broken to begin with? So I guess the most iconic scene was the ending, right?
Oh yes, that's right.
The final scene. So so Brundlefly kidnaps Victoria from the hospital where she's about to have an abortion, right? And he tells her that he wants to sort of that he wants her to come with him and sort of like...
That's right, he tells her not to have the abortion, for her
Yeah.
to have the child. And this, I think he said that this would be like the closest thing that he has to being human.
Yeah, his
that-
offspring, right?
That's right, his offspring. And when he kidnaps Veronica, it does... part of something came into my mind that seemed similar to the scene from King Kong. Well, a different
yes.
sort of situation, because
Because they're on the top of a roof somewhere.
that's right, exactly.
Yeah.
And maybe perhaps an inspiration for that scene from, well, David Cronenberg perhaps was inspired by that scene from King Kong. But that's right, so he does take her back to his apartment, and then Steffes also has the idea to go back to the apartment because he thinks that's where he would have gone, or where she would have gone.
Well, I guess, the King Kong analogy works really well because, he's the monster and she's the beauty, right? So it's harking back to the ending, it's like beauty killed the beast and that sort of thing. So I guess
yes.
I can see that, yeah. And when he says that he sort of thinks that's where she would have gone, I guess it sort of speaks to that he thinks at least that he thinks about her actually a lot, to the point where he sort of tries to imagine what she would do in certain situations, right? Which is also why he drinks himself silly at the beginning of the film, because he sort of assumes that that's what she is thinking, and that's probably, I mean, I wouldn't say that it's a bit of a presumptuous thing to do in general if you're in a social interaction, to sort of assume to know what the other person will do, and yeah, I guess it's just something that came to mind, because it makes it even more obvious how clumsy he is in his social interactions, right? So, but yeah,
That's right. The ending scene is just phenomenal. So I think that's the reason why I was so obsessed with the movie since watching it. Just the build up throughout the movie, that you see his that's right, his skin is getting worse as the movie goes on. You see that he's losing certain body parts, that he's losing his fingernails, that he's losing his teeth. You see him experiment with foods, and he has to change the way that he eats as well, and he does make that video about
and that's also something that comes in
that's right, to the ending. That's right, it's all build up, it's all exposition, information that you need for the end scene, of course.
Yeah, because otherwise it wouldn't work if he just suddenly like dissolves if he suddenly dissolves the hand and the leg out of nowhere. You wouldn't know why that was. Like, people would ask, well, why when we're given this information that he could do stuff like that before. It's like, but this way we sort of know already what's in store by the end of the film. Like, at least we're aware what he can do to other people potentially.
That's right. The trope is called Chekhov's gun. That's right.
Yeah.
An element that's introduced at the beginning or halfway through the movie or novel, and that's going to play into effect towards the end.
Yeah, if you show, that's because if you show a gun in a film, at some point you have to someone's
going to use it.
It has to get used in some fashion. Like, even if it's not on someone else, it has to go off at some point. Because otherwise, why would you show it? The other thing is that so her ex-boyfriend at some point
follows her to the apartment or goes back to Brundle's apartment.
Yeah, and he gets surprised by Brundle, and gets his hand dissolved, gets his leg dissolved, and Brundlefly asks Victoria, if she's going to help him or not, and she they sort of descend into the laboratory, and then he explains to her what he wants to do, and then she doesn't want to because of the implications, and because she realizes that this is actually not any. I mean, it's not a rational thing to do. It's like, I want to preserve my humanity. Let's make it. Let's mix my tainted humanity with it. So it's like I don't, that you wouldn't be able. I mean, I just didn't understand exactly how he would rationalize that. Just in the sense that he doesn't. In the end, he doesn't actually want to be left alone. That's the only thing. He sort of wants to have his family with him in a way that doesn't allow them to leave him because he's so hideously deteriorated. And it's really sad. But at the same time, we know that he can't be allowed to go through with this idea. So it's actually, it's a really good thing that the plan doesn't succeed. And while and then something. I mean, at least at first when I watched it the first time, I just didn't understand, like, if he merged with the pod when the process gets interrupted.
That's right. I didn't understand that at first as well. I didn't realize until I watched it the second time that you do see that he merges with the door.
Yes,
of the first pod.
Because he when he sees that when he hears that the cables are cut, then he sort of tries to get out of his pod, and whilst he's getting out, the machine, the countdown hits 0, and then the process goes through, and he sort of becomes part machine by the end as well. So he's a total mess by the end of the film. You're asking yourself, like, why does this guy have to suffer so much, actually? And that's also that, once again, feeds also into the idea that don't play God with technology. Like, don't overstretch yourself, humans.
And then, much like what we said about the 1958 Fly, so the ending scene would be that he grabs the shotgun and points it to his face, similar to in the original when, the original Fly asks for his wife to kill him. Yeah. But in the
original, it's a much more elaborate way of killing him. It's like she has to crush it in his arm, right? That's why she has to use it twice, and that's also something that at least at the beginning of the 58 version they remark upon. They said it has been used twice, the machine.
So that's why it was used twice, to crush the arm.
To crush the face and to crush the arm. I think that's why. That's because otherwise people would have seen the deformity and they would have asked, what is this?
Why would they see the deformity anyway, even if it is crushed?
Well, no, because I guess because it's flat, like like
Oh, okay.
piece of paper, so you don't actually see anything. And it's a 58 film where people wouldn't. I don't think the science fiction films of that time were that big on the logical implications
Oh,
anyway.
okay.
I don't know. It's because like if you I don't know, there are lots of films from that are pulpy horror films, like because or pulpy science fiction films, because you might find like you might like a film about big ants, like big flesh eating ants, like I don't know, because of radioactivity or something, I guess, that sort of thing. Or there's a film that's called The Claw, which with a big bird
Oh, okay.
it's described as a battleship. I mean, uh, and people don't ask why they're calling it big, like a battleship, because it's a bird, it flies, it's not like a battleship. Why call it a battleship? I don't know. It's probably why not say a jumbo jet or something like that, or why it's like I don't know. Really, really strange sci-fi films at the time, and I think that's also part of the charm, because they're so they're carefree. They don't try to tie themselves down to all logical fallacies that can present themselves. It's sort of like you have a concept, you have an idea, go with it, and try to have it make more or less some kind of sense. That's how I see it. But maybe you have a different idea of it.
Well, speaking of logic, you were talking about logic and you were talking about ants. So that's something that I was thinking about during the movie. So as soon as that he goes through the telepod, transports himself, but he merges or fuses with the fly, he becomes almost like superhuman, or he's extra strong.
Yeah.
Is there anything documented on the strength of flies?
I don't know, but I guess it has something to do, as you said. I mean, maybe it's by association with ants that they can lift sort of.
That's right. I've heard that ants can lift 10 times their own weight. I think I have heard something like that in the past, or seen it documented that they are extra strong. They can lift 10 times the size of themselves, or 10 times their own weight. That sort of thing.
Flies, you mean? I don't know. It's just that I mean I just know of ants that they're sort of like supposed to be able to lift 50 times.
Oh yeah, 50.
Yeah, and flies themselves, I don't necessarily know, and I can't find anything.
Nothing on
for the
Google.
moment. Yeah. But it's just like I don't know exactly.
Just in case if you happen to know.
No, sorry.
No, it's okay.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'll find the answer someday.
Sure, in a biology book somewhere, it should be it should be indicated somewhere. But no, yeah, but it's probably also because it's dramatically efficient, because it makes it sound like something great at first, because because he thinks that it's actually beneficial, when in reality it turns out much worse. And yeah, it's sort of meant to set off your alarm bells, because you know that something else was in the pod anyway, and so you think, oh well, this is you're aware of the fact that this is only temporary. This cannot be everything that happened there. So over the course of the film, you sort of discover, oh yeah, this is not good. This was, this is a short-term beneficial consequence to what is otherwise a pretty horrific development in his life. So I guess you could call it maybe an enhancer. At least it is an enhancer, and in some ways, because at least when he finally is a fly, you can sort of assume that he's probably stronger than he was before, because he manages to sort of break the window. And yeah, it's probably sort of just meant to be an indication that not everything is going to be good, because when there's an upside to something, there has to be a downside to it as well, and then the downside is much worse.
He must have been really drunk, though, the way that it was filmed when he is in the telepod, and even the baboon notices that the fly buzzes right past him, and you have to think he's staring right at it as the fly buzzes right past him into like the back corner of the telepod, and he doesn't even notice or do anything about it. But that's actually another thing I was going to ask. Right, so the way that it's filmed, I wasn't sure. Right, does the fly go into the telepod, or is it on the outside of the telepod?
No, I think we were meant to think that it's on the inside.
I was thinking it was on the inside, but part of me sort of thought that the fly could be on the outside part of the telepod or the outside window.
But then I would question how the DNA got mixed together, because if it's not on the inside, I mean, the things that get teleported have to be on the inside of the telepod. So if the fly is not inside, how can the DNA get mixed together?
I guess similar to how when Brundle is mixed with the door of the telepod, he's on the outside at the time.
Oh, I mean, it could be, but I wouldn't know what the explanation of that would be. If there was a maybe I don't know, some kind of problem with the pod itself, that it sort of wasn't exactly.
Right, he said that he was still doing tests on that particular telepod at the beginning of the movie. Yeah,
but he manages to send the baboon in without problems. And that's, at least we are meant to assume then that it works. But yeah, I just always assumed that it was on the inside, because I just wouldn't know how. I mean, the fact that he gets merged with the door at the end is because he's partly inside, partly outside. He sort of manages to put one foot outside, and then the process begins, and then he's sort of trapped and comes out completely.
I guess I was just trying to find some reason or some logical reason why he didn't react at that point if he notices a fly.
It's probably because, I mean, we know that he tries it on himself because at least in that moment he's sort of trying to see if it works on him. So and also because he's being he's partly motivated because of the fact that he thinks that Veronica might not actually come back or something to him in a way, because he's sort of not sure exactly what she feels about him, so he's sort of, his mind is elsewhere, right? So that's how I always felt it was, but I don't know.
Oh, that's true.
That he
is crazily drunk at this point.
Yeah,
and he did want a Chinese takeaway at this point, and then she just leaves straight away. So he's probably thinking about that. So I'm sure I've been in that situation where I'm thinking, let's go for a takeaway, let's buy a takeaway, but then it just falls through at the last minute, and it's like, oh, now I have to cook for myself and make my own dinner. It's a big letdown, a big disappointment.
Yeah, and it's because what else? I mean, what is he? If she had left a note maybe to explain it, then that would probably not be a problem. But at the same time, it's like, would he even believe that as an excuse? Because he seems to be like the kind of guy who doesn't, as I said, it's just sort of he's not used to being around women that often, probably, and yeah. He just probably doesn't know how to take it, and that's pretty harsh for at least for the way that he imagines it, and so that's where the problem lies, I guess. It's because he doesn't trust her enough, and he cares. Ironically, he has a very human emotion there. He cares a lot about her as a human being, at least at the beginning of the film, and yeah, that's sort of like what preoccupies him, and what basically makes him not realize that the fly gets inside the telepod. And that's probably the reason for everything else. So I guess the fact that he had such a profoundly human emotion that led to him losing his humanity is actually very, very interesting to me. But yeah, nothing like that in the 58 film.
Oh, true. Have you
Yeah.
ever watched any of the anthropology type shows like The Twilight Zone, The Outer Limits, maybe Alfred Hitchcock Presents, those types of shows from
Oh,
the 50s or 60s?
no, sadly I haven't. I watched like one or two Twilight Zone episodes on YouTube at some point, but nothing. I mean, sadly, I don't. I haven't seen any of those shows, so it's. But I usually hear from people who watch them that they are really interesting because they have sort of sometimes very, very strange and interesting concepts.
That's right, they do have nice quirky moments, some great concepts, some fascinating concepts, really good development. That's right, development of characters, development of story as well. So I think I've watched maybe season 1 and 2, season 1 and 2 of The Twilight Zone, and I've also watched season 1 of Outer Limits. But I remember when I was recording a podcast for The Planet of the Apes, so The Planet of the Apes also written by Rod Sterling, so the writer of The Twilight Zone.
Ah, yeah.
Back when I used to visit IMDb a lot and read a lot of the threads, there was this long thread about movies that feel like they are or they should be episodes of The Twilight Zone, and I was thinking The Planet of the Apes is an example of that, but also it seems like The Fly has a concept that's similar to an episode of The Twilight Zone,
Yeah, that's actually.
or it's something that could be condensed to a 30-minute show similar to The Twilight Zone, or an hour show perhaps.
I could see that. It's just that I wouldn't want it to be at least the 86 version. I wouldn't want it to be condensed because it's I like everything in that film as it is. I could see the 58 version being trimmed down to
Oh yeah,
episode length though, and that's probably. I mean, there has to be some kind of a similar episode to that out there, at least in some form for some show, but I haven't seen it yet. So I if I ever stumble upon something like that, I am definitely gonna try to see if I can find something similar. I mean, with similar depth in there, but usually. Like if you have a 20-minute show, I mean, a 1 hour show is probably much better because you have a lot more time. But at the same time, it's still not like an almost 2 hour movie. So
the example that I did have in the horror movie podcast was this episode of The Outer Limits called The Man Who Was Never Born, and it's just about in the future there's a nuclear reaction that kills off a lot of the people, and they have a bad side effect, like they're very deformed, the people in this time in the future, and it's all because of one man in the 20th century who I guess he led to the development and he did the funding that worked on all these projects that caused the nuclear reaction and brought about these nuclear reactive products into the environment. So one guy goes back in time and meets the mother of this person before he's even born, and he thinks about killing her during the episode, but he has this way to disguise himself where he looks like an attractive man, but at times you can actually see what he looks like, and he does look similar to, I guess, Brundle towards the end of the movie. So that was also playing on my mind as well when I was watching this movie, The Fly.
Yeah, because I mean, it's about the interaction between a man and a woman, right? It's very much tied to what this film's about. I mean, that's also where the emotional investment comes from.
Oh yeah, exactly.
In a film, it's just because you're invested in these two, maybe three characters, and yeah, it's you want them to make it out okay, and they don't, and it's foreseeable from a mile away that this is not gonna have a good ending. But at the same time, you're sort of trained to expect that from English speaking films generally. I guess at least from Hollywood. But then you get a Canadian filmmaker like Cronenberg who doesn't play by those rules, and that's that's also something that I like about the film. It's like it doesn't stick to any conventions or obligations that you might have. Like with zombie films, you can have an unhappy ending more often than not, because how would you get rid of that many undead creatures, right? It's like it's much more likely that they're gonna at some point catch up with you and eat you. Whereas with this is on a much smaller scale, but at the same time the implications, because of the emotional investment, are much bigger. At least they feel bigger, because the stakes they are really high, and because it's just more, because it's more about just surviving. It's about something else.
There's an emotional connection to, I guess, the characters, to the love story, to the fate of this man that was just trying to, I guess, change the world, like you said in the beginning. But then it's, I guess, his work now ends, and then his life now ends as well.
It's also, if you think about it, have you seen the movie Splice?
No, I don't think I have.
No, it's about these two scientists who basically they create they make an artificial being that at least at the beginning doesn't look anything like a human being, but then when she grows up, she becomes more humanoid. But yeah, it's also something that has sort of reminiscences with The Fly, because there's also a love triangle, but in this case it's really I don't know, it's really incestuous, and I think I just because it involves like bodily transformation and evolution and all that stuff, you might think this film comes from or it takes its inspiration from the Cronenberg Fly, because it's just the themes are really, at least it feels like it's really tied to the 86 Fly version. So
I'll certainly look up.
It's just because it has a lot of influence on other things. I think it had a lot of influence on other things, and even the original gets at least referenced from time to time in other media, right? At least you can have you ever? I've never watched many episodes when I was younger, but when I watched the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, there was this Baxter Stockman character, who is this scientist who gets turned into a fly human hybrid. In the that's in old cartoons, in the very, very old ones.
Alright, it was a favourite show of mine, but it's been a long time since I've actually watched it, and I've, I guess, forgotten a lot of what I did watch, but I definitely have watched it, and it was like maybe a regular TV show that I would watch at the weekends. Yeah,
and there's at least this sort of visual allusion. It alludes to the 58 version, I guess, more, because the character has like fly wings and a fly head and all that. But it's at least the concept has had its fair share of cultural impact, because it's also something that you can find, and I remember mentioning that, but just maybe to put it out there again.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just gonna say, like, the Kafka story, like the Metamorphosis.
That's right. It was. That's right. It's definitely not something that was cut from the horror movie podcast, because I remember you mentioning that. That's right.
I mean, it's not about the progression of the change, but it's rather about, suddenly being confronted with a whole new environment, like a whole new body,
and how society would react to you as well.
How it basically. I mean, I still think that the reaction of the parents is sort of meant to be the reaction of xenophobic people to foreigners, people who they consider less than themselves, right? Racist people who don't consider people of another ethnicity to be of the same, of the same value, in quotation marks, even though I don't think that you should talk about people in those terms. But from a racist person's point of view, probably that's how they see it. They're saying, I'm much better than these people are. They're disgusting and filthy, and they're just scum of the earth, or everything like that. I guess at least in that short story, you can read that into it. With The Fly, I don't think that there is a comparable element to that, and because I mean, besides the fact that the Geena Davis character doesn't want to bring in a child into the world that is likely going to be a mutant. I mean, at least from what she knows. But at the same time, that's not mainly the real focus of the film. The focus of the film is sort of like Brundle's deterioration. But yeah, because it has the transformation from man to insect. It's very interesting because insects are on the opposite side of the of at least from what we consider to be intelligent life, right? Because insects, I mean, if you look at, I don't know, I remember my chemistry teacher who was also a biology teacher once telling me that if you look at grasshoppers, or they mainly have they don't have a brain, but they have a big stomach. That's it. They don't, it's sort of man, this creature that thinks itself above all other creatures, being made into one of the lower life forms of that exists on our planet, like insects that basically they just eat and multiply, and that's it. And at least in the second case, Brundle, at least when he talks about family, sort of like, you can maybe see some element of the insect instinct kicking in, sort of when he talks about the perfect family, sort of about reproduction, and that's also where the other woman comes in that you mentioned, the one that he tries to get into the telepod before Victoria shows up and ruins the fun.
At that point, he still thinks that it's a good thing that he's more enhanced, or he feels more rejuvenated, that he has more energy and he's stronger at that point. So he thinks that's because of the telepods. So that's why he wants to share that with others.
But I just find the idea very interesting that the human being that sort of thinks of itself as special. We sort of think that we own the planet that we live on, even though we're just guests, right? Like anyone else. And then that's it. When we're sort of turned into, in the film at least, he's sort of turned into a being that's partly really that's still partly human, but at the same time is progressively getting more and more primal and basic, in its needs. And I guess it's really interesting that you go from one extreme to the other in a couple of in 2 hours or something. It's the reverse 2001 where you get from humanity from
Yeah.
humanity to a whole kind of different being like at the end, but that's sort of meant to be like an enlightening an enlightenment experience, right? It's a sort of meant to, oh yeah, we are sort of evolving into something more, but here we are evolving into something partly less, I guess. It's also once again it harkens back to the idea that Cronenberg makes films about people who are who have a diseased body, or who are changing, or who are not completely in reality, and that's in most of his films. Like you have to, at least the early ones, because now he doesn't really make many body horror films anymore. So yeah, I just think that it's really interesting when you sort of look at a fly, which is sort of the inconsequential insect, like that no one sort of takes notice of.
Oh yes.
And yeah, the human being that's sort of, at least that we sort of tout as the most special of specialist things on this great planet. So it's really really interesting. So that is and that I guess that also has something to do with the fact that he has sort of this idea that he will change the world. So the self-importance comes in, like I'm going to change everything and be special and all that sort of thing. It's hubris, right? So and that's why I think this film stands up, because it has all these very different but at the same time very related ideas at the heart of it. But yeah, I also think it's probably one of Cronenberg's best films. I mean, I know that people prefer films like Videodrome. Yeah, I haven't seen Videodrome, but I have seen The Brood. I have seen like films like History of Violence, Eastern Promises, Naked Lunch I've seen as well. But yeah, it's really, so this is really special, because it doesn't, I mean, there's a look to Cronenberg's body horror films that just isn't here. It looks a bit different from I mean, the maybe it's because of the color palette, because it's mainly dark blue and gray and all that stuff. Sometimes it's often at night, I think as well, right? So yeah, no, it's really I don't know, it has a visual aesthetic that is really that makes it stand out from the other films that Cronenberg has made.
One thing that you were saying was the movie is very 80s, so there's an 80s style to it. The hair as well is very 80s. The cars that you see, the computer screen that Brundle was working with. But one thing that also caught my attention was the look of Brundle towards the end of the movie, or well, halfway through the movie, as he's making that slow decaying process, that he looks very much like Michael Jackson at the time, like 80s style Michael Jackson, like maybe from from the album cover of Bad, especially his hair as well. I'm not sure if maybe it was like inspired by Michael Jackson at the time when they were doing the makeup process.
I have no idea if that's the case. I mean, it could be, but I mean, what I've read doesn't say it. But I mean, I wouldn't say it's impossible. Especially because I mean, Michael Jackson was such a big figure,
one of the biggest music stars of the time.
Yeah, and right up until he died. So I guess it's really possible that they could have chosen to do that. I've seen photos of Michael Jackson, like when he had a small, like when he had like stubble.
Oh yeah.
and I thought he looked like a big bat, basically. Yeah, because of but that was when he was like, that was a photo post 2000s, when he was like, absolutely white
Oh yeah,
and
bleached.
skeleton, and had this the very weird nose, and I yeah, it just looked really strange to me, and I can see, like, it's that's also something, like a big process, right? You look at Michael Jackson when he was a kid, and then you look at him when he was an adult, and
The drastic transformation or
drastic
drastic difference in appearance.
complete renunciation of his former identity, which is sad, because at the same time it's but it's his choice, I guess. So it's, if he wanted to change
Oh,
his
you mean you don't believe what he says about his skin condition?
Oh, I mean, that's good. I mean, I think that there's probably something to that as well. It's just that I just thought, probably it had something also to do with, disassociating himself with his father, from his father, or something.
I think I have read, no, not read, but seen a documentary on Michael Jackson that despite the fact that he did have that skin condition, pigmentation, I think, of the skin, that he was still buying products that would make his skin whiter, and it was shown in his bank statements or on his credit details as well, that he actually was still buying those medication or prescriptions to make his skin whiter.
Okay. Because I had never. I mean, I haven't read much about because I usually didn't listen a lot to Michael Jackson, so I wasn't really reading about him as well. I mean, I knew that he was a big. I have some of his CDs now, but I was never really a big fan. So I don't know exactly, all the details of his life. I just knew everything, because he had so many surgeries. That's the main thing that always stuck out. Like the fact that he had so many surgeries to change his face, and so I was thinking, well, he's probably,
the biggest
really
shock
vain.
for me is when I watched a documentary on Michael Jackson. It was from an early concert of his back in the 1980s, and he had this big accident on the stage. He fell down, and there was this pyrotechnic technique that they were trying out as part of the show, but he burned part of his head, and because of that he became bald, or he had patches on his hair. That like from then onwards, he was always wearing wigs.
Oh, okay.
So you really did hide that from like the public, because I had no idea that he was wearing wigs or if he was using anything to make his hair better.
Wow. I mean, I didn't know that. I mean, those kinds of things I don't know because I don't keep up with it.
Oh yeah, I know.
But it's if you think, I mean, you might, I mean, because at some point Brundle also loses some of his hair and so that sort of thing. So I guess the parallels could be there. There's strong indications that this could be probably so it alludes to. I mean, at least you could see it in there. You could see this sort of parallel in the film, even though it might never have been connected to that at all. But that's why the film is so interesting, because you can read all kinds of stuff into it, and it's also because the film doesn't have a lot of exposition. It's not really. I at least I don't think it was that exposition heavy or something. It's just like it lets you get the ideas visually rather than through dialogue.
Another favourite scene of mine is, so it does seem like a throwaway scene, that it's not really important. It's not like one of the big highlight scenes, but I found it funny that after Veronica goes to see Brundle again, she starts to see all the changes, like he's losing his skin, his skin is becoming worse. I think this when she shows him, she shows him how he eats, and she captures it on video. But
Yeah.
that's right. She goes to Stathis to ask, "What do I do?" Or she needs his help, and he's just saying, "You should stay away, keep away, just leave him as he is." And he looks like that, so he's not going to be leaving his apartment anytime soon. But then she says something like, "I don't care what you want," because he's trying to tell her.
Yeah.
He's trying to say, "What? Look, I want," and she says, "I don't care what you want." I think that's one of the better scenes for me. I found that one of the funniest scenes as part of the movie.
No, because she's I mean, it's because it's a film that allows her to be and to make a big decision, or at least show him directly. She's affirmative, like in what she thinks and what she says, and so that's generally, I think, also something important to note, that she's not. I mean, she makes a lot of decisions on her own, right? She makes she decides to have the kid aborted, and obviously it's stopped because Brundle comes to kidnap her and stuff. But yeah, she's a character, at least who has at least from what I remember from the film, she has a lot of agency, and that's not something that you had a lot, at least in those kinds of films, except for maybe the Alien franchise, where
That's right. She does make that decision. It's a snappy decision that she does make to abort the child after she has that final meeting with Brundle, and it's so serious the way that she sees him at that point that she just wants it out of her straight away. And even at the dead of night, that she's urging Stathis to take her to somewhere to get rid of it as soon as she can.
Yeah, I mean, I can't fault her for that decision necessarily, because I think she doesn't have any idea whether or not the child was conceived before or after he went into the telepod. So yeah, she doesn't want to probably bring into the world a child that might actually suffer as a result of that accident, right? I mean,
it could also be a fear that something could happen to her from delivering on the pregnancy. She could die from the pregnancy as well. There's just that unknown about the situation.
Yeah, that could also be part of it. It's just probably because she doesn't want to. She doesn't because she doesn't actually know what she's going to give birth to, and because literally she has no idea what it is, at least in terms of what kind of species it is, and so on, and so it's I mean, it's probably a lot more sensitive an issue in the US than it is at least in some European countries, where abortion is not necessarily that big of a. I mean, it's still a big deal, but it's not it's not where like in some of the states in the US where abortion is prohibited, right? Legal under the law or something. There's some European countries that allow for it. So I just think it's probably a very sensitive issue if you talk to it. If you talk to maybe a lot of the American viewers, so it's probably cultural sensitivities are much more nuanced depending on where you are watching it, and I also think that's part of that's part of the interest that the film provokes, is that there are certain issues dealt with within the film that are in certain parts of the world politicized to a certain extent. So people have heated discussions about it, and in this case, I think the choices she makes is very. I mean, it's a very consequence heavy choice, but at the same time isn't. I mean, she sort of thinks that it's in the best interest of everyone involved, right? Because she probably also doesn't think that Brundlefly is going to. I mean, she probably has no idea how to even raise the child on her own, and then, yeah, and yeah, it's a very complicated situation, I guess, and I'm just glad that I'm not in that situation where I have to make that decision.
Oh yeah, ditto.
But yeah, no, it's.
I guess you were saying that the parallels to like the big disease at the moment. So there was a lot of comparisons to AIDS at the time, because around then that was the big AIDS epidemic.
Yeah.
Happening at the time. So then you were saying there's a comparison to. You feel it's sort of an analogy of leprosy. Is that right?
I would say that it's actually an analogy more of disease in general, not just AIDS alone, and that's what also Cronenberg said. I mean, he said it was a big deal at the time when the film came out. So of course people were going to associate it with AIDS, but he apparently said it's about decay and death and all those things that people are not really comfortable with, and aging as well, because when he's walking with the canes, you have the impression that he's like an old man. Maybe he sort of talked about the fact that he wasn't trying to have it be a film that was talking about an issue like that was new, like AIDS or something, and yeah, I guess you could apply it to disease in general. Like we talked about leprosy at the beginning, and we could also talk about maybe Ebola, even though I don't think that particular crisis, at least in the US, is. I mean, I think there's a lot of fear mongering.
There's not as much fear that it will spread to. Oh, I see. You don't feel that it'll spread as.
Yeah, I mean, so when people talk about, when people draw comparisons between AIDS and what Brundlefly goes through in the film, I think you could basically use any disease that has a deteriorating effect on the body and substitute it for what Brundlefly is going through. So yeah, I think it has a relevance to the extent that it talks about how people who are in that situation react to it, how people cope with disease and how people cope with infirmity, and it's at least we know that here he has moments where he's sort of more or less optimistic about his chances, and then there are moments where he isn't, and I noted the fact that in the scene where he shows her his natural history museum and where he films himself, he's I mean there's probably something a bit more of a there's a sadness in there, but at the same time it's also like there's a bit of a, I don't know, I had the impression that there was also a bit of an excitement there as to where he was going, because being a scientist and everything, I think there's also a part of curiosity that thinks, well, I wonder where I'm going to end up, and that's probably like there are different feelings happening there at the same time, which I find is not something that you get every day, like this sort of nuance and diversity of different emotions, because in most of the time in horror films, at least in bad horror films, the characters are really one or two dimensional, and they don't have much depth to them. And here it's the complete opposite. So I'm really glad that that's the case. So
I do like what you said about the movie being an analogy for, I guess, disease in general, and also, I guess, the human condition of growing older as well. Like you lose, I guess, a 20-year-old eventually becomes a 40-year-old, and maybe overweight, maybe not, but not the same physical condition as he was when he was 20 years old. But also, there's always a big disease in the press as well. Like currently it's Ebola. But remember when it used to be swine flu? I remember back
swine
in the
flu, bird flu.
I remember back in the day, it was that's all I would read in the newspapers. It would be like front page news about swine flu, like back about 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And then I guess at the time it was AIDS that was the big news stories at the time. So there's always a disease that you can find to, I guess, if you look hard enough, you'll see it in, I guess, in this movie or other movies, I guess, that focus on maybe disease or decaying or degradation, like I guess like The Fly.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I think that AIDS is probably the closest that people that's the one that people associate it with, because it's a disease that sort of weakens you to the point where or weakens your immune system to the point that it's not. I mean, it's really it's a deadly disease. So obviously,
I remembered why I brought that up in the first place. So okay. I was talking about the pregnancy and how so Veronica rushes to the hospital. She wants it out as soon as possible, but it made me think of, like, say if it was AIDS at the time, I guess if you did find yourself pregnant at the time and you found out that your partner had AIDS, you would probably think the same thing, or you would probably have the same reaction.
I was thinking about that as well. It's really the thing that it's in, that AIDS is a disease that is infectious, that you can infect other people with. In this case, it's not it's not Geena Davis's character, but at the same time, she feels that maybe the child has been infected by it, and so I guess because it's also as a result of a sexual intercourse, that also has something to do with it. I guess maybe if you wanted to, you could go to maybe other sexually transmitted diseases,
exactly.
Like syphilis and
true.
And so I guess that AIDS is that's why AIDS is the one that springs to mind to most people, because most people we know that AIDS can be transmitted through sexual intercourse. So that's how I would. That's how.
And then
I guess the analogy works in that sense. So yeah.
And also, Stathis does mention it as well when they're trying to explain the situation to the doctor, that she's the father is someone that is deformed. So I guess another similar situation, the fear that your child could be deformed, which is, I guess, one of the reasons why a lot of people have abortions as well.
Oh yeah, because they fear that their child may have some may suffer from maybe medical problems,
or I guess not
medical problems, or social exclusion later on in life.
Oh yes,
and all that. So of course, but of course for some people that wouldn't warrant a decision to have the child aborted, but at the same time, like, it's something. Okay, you maybe think that's what people might think about in those situations, right? I mean, at the same time. It's I don't necessarily think that it's probably just here's the physical thing, because she thinks that it might be a mutant, half man, half fly mutant or something, but I don't know, it touches on all these different issues, which is why I appreciate the film so much. And again, it's not something that you have in the. You can't talk. We've talked about 2.5 hours now about the 86 version, and the 58 version just doesn't have that much meat on its bones, I guess. And because it's mostly a mystery, it's mostly
It does feel like the 1958 version. Supposedly it was a big hit at the time, a big box office hit, but it just feels like a B movie to me.
Yeah, that's
when I watch it.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. That's why I think the great thing about the 58 version is still, I mean, Vincent Price is always interesting. I can watch him in literally anything. and because most of the time, like, he plays a very either he plays Dr. Phibes, or something like he plays another shady character, like in House of Wax or something like that.
Oh, okay.
He plays, he plays villainous people or mad people quite well, actually. And yeah, at least in the 58 version, he's sort of like, more or less like the guy from The Last Man on Earth, where he's the sympathetic character, who has to sort of, who is the protagonist, like who hasn't any sort of moral shadiness to him at all. Actually, he's really upright and well intentioned, and that's a nice thing for this film to have, because it allows Vincent Price to show that he is not just a one-trick pony, that he can do different things quite well, actually. But yeah, the thing is that besides Vincent Price and the fly makeup in the original version, there's not much else that stands out to me. I mean, the last moment in the garden where they sort of see the fly, and then
and decide to do nothing about it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess when I watched it, I had the impression that they sort of decided to mercy kill it before the spider got to it.
It looks like the spider does get to the fly before they do anything.
Oh, okay. It gets really close, and then I got the idea that at least because we don't see anything after that, I thought that they sort of destroy the net and then sort of kill the fly in the process. But I could be wrong about that, because I've just seen the film once, so I'm not really sure. But yeah, I guess the idea of euthanasia could be, where she's sort of assisting where the woman's sort of assisting the suicide of the scientist, and that's also something that's in the end part of the 86 version, and yeah, I find that the 58 version maybe focuses more on that than on anything else. It could, I mean, that's at least how I saw it when I watched it, but I could be totally wrong. So for the 58 version, to me at least, there's not much more to say. Only that, for a large part of it, it's not really horrifying. It's not really sinister, or it's not really. I mean, it's for the most part, it's just a very quiet mystery film, which is fine. I don't dislike it, but it's in comparison to the other one, it doesn't hold a candle to it, in my opinion. But yeah, it's still a very enjoyable film with good performances. Yeah, it's also probably because it's a longer film also, the 86 version.
No, they're actually just about the same length of time, both about 90 minutes each.
Oh yeah, which actually goes to show that when you have a 90-minute film, then you can still do a lot. You don't need to have 2.5 hours to 3 hours, an hour and a half, an hour and 40 minutes maybe. But then again, the long films that I really enjoy, like Ten Commandments and all that stuff, big epics.
I think for DVDs, so something I'm going to buy, the theatre going experience, I prefer the movies to be, I guess, 2 hours, maybe an hour and a half. But if I'm buying it on DVD, I do like, I guess, longer films. I mean, I know it's quantity doesn't make quality, but sometimes when I know that they are well reviewed or they've got great ratings on IMDb, for example, I do look for the longer movies. And similar for books as well, that I'm picking up or might be thinking of buying, like the longer pages or the ones that are epic or like 1,000+ pages, for example. I do like to I do like to read those books as well.
Yeah, I mean, I the only thing is that when I have a 1,000-page book, for instance, like Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix,
Oh yes.
where I mean, the thing is, I had to force myself through that book because it wasn't what I expected, and it felt like a lot of stuff happening, like
Probably
little things. Like there wasn't. I mean, I didn't have the feeling that there was that it was part of the big narrative, so to speak. I mean, you could basically remove it, most of it. You could remove it, and it would still maybe be a really good story, but it wasn't necessarily all tied to the main story. I guess was my problem with it.
A lot of people feel that way, that the fifth book is the biggest disappointment, and probably the book with the most hype because it was the first book after the first movie had been released.
It was also the first. I mean, it was also after book 4, which is by most people considered to be the best book in the series. So I don't know. That was a really big act to follow. And yeah, I don't know. But yeah, it's if you want to do something epic, usually that, I mean, people are ready to give you more leeway in terms of length. So if you're doing a Batman movie like The Dark Knight, then people are ready to give you 2.5 hours because if you can keep them interested for that time, then that's people are willing to spend that much time in this theater if they want to watch something. But yeah, otherwise it's not necessarily a good idea to start off with a big long movie like 2001 is really long.
Yes.
And so if that kind of film tires you out, then it's probably not the best thing to watch. But at the same time, you should watch it because it's actually a really good film with good ideas in it. But yeah, it's a really slow film. But if you're used to, if you can adjust your viewing experience to that, then maybe it's not such a bad thing. And I think that, the 58 version flies by a lot. It flies by a lot faster, but that's because it's a much lighter film as well. I think it's because it's doesn't have all that heavy stuff in it to make
That's
it.
right. It's not as dramatic
Yeah.
as the 1986 version, and there's also a lot of suspense in the 1958 version. So there is a mystery aspect of what has happened to the inventor, and you don't find out until maybe 40 or 50 minutes into the movie.
Oh yeah, I think you see the fly head only after the hour mark, right?
Oh, I see. It's hour. I
It's
think that's right.
When I watched it, I thought it was at 1 hour and 10 minutes where she first pulls off the blanket, and so she sees it, and then it's actually really late into the film where that happens. So but it's not completely the end. Like the fly in the Cronenberg version is only revealed to be really there by the end when she rips his face off. So,
and that's just, I guess, a sign of excellent storytelling. That I guess I'm sure I've listened to podcasts in the past that have talked about older movies that set the scene, or they do a build up of the story, whereas movies like King Kong, where it did take a long time before you actually seen the monster in King Kong, the 1933 version. Whereas it was a different story in the 2005 version, because the audience today want to see what they've came to see. I guess the monster or the creature, what they've paid to see.
It's like around the half. It's probably around the halfway point of the film in the 2006 version where you see him, right, and then the rest of the film is sort of like spending time with him. And getting to know him as a character and stuff. So whereas I think in the earlier versions of that story, he's just a big ape that kidnaps the
Oh, yeah.
girl, right? So yeah, not much, not probably that much more. I mean, there's probably still some depth to him, but I guess it's probably not. It's there's a build up to it, as you say. The films, they can get by probably much more without having to showing it, whereas with more recent fare, it's sort of like people don't like to wait. People don't seem to have like ADD or something. They want to see everything right away, and if they have to sort of get through the first act, which is a bit slow, they say, "Oh, nothing's happening at all, and I'm really bored, and this movie sucks and everything."
I'm sure it's a similar situation with the original Planet of the Apes film compared to the 2001 remake of the story.
Yeah, but I haven't seen the 2001 remake because I've been told by everyone that it's really bad as a film.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's confusing as well.
Yeah, and but yeah, I actually have the original on DVD as well, and despite the fact that it's quote unquote slow, I still find it really interesting. It's like, even if there are parts of the film where it appears to be more character based and less story driven, I don't have a problem with that, because the character that Charlton Heston plays is actually quite, even though he's a prick, he's interesting enough to where, I mean, because he's so out of his element and doesn't know what way he is and all that stuff.
He really does dominate the movie. That's the big focus is on him, that he steals every scene that he's in. Charlton Heston.
Yeah. And which actually makes me much more sad when I think of, it's like Clint Eastwood. Clint Eastwood doing all these great films, and then you find out, oh, he's such a right winger. It's like, yeah, that's a bit disappointing. At least to me, who is like super left, but it's. I try not to think about politics when I watch. I mean, about the politics of the actors or the directors when I watch the film, because I don't want it to distract me from the film itself. Because I still think that you can come away from a film with your own ideas and your own meaning, and you don't have to worry about what the director tried to show you, as long as you can justify what you got out of it by looking at the film. So
I think politics is something that I like to look at as an afterthought. So once I have watched the movie, and maybe I'm going back to it and looking into the background to the story and how maybe the politics has influenced the story, or what changes they've made to the story because of politics. Like, I can't think of any examples right now, but I'm sure maybe if
if you want, have you seen Ken Russell's The Devils?
The Devils. Oh no, I haven't.
Yeah, no, that was a film that was heavily cut because of nudity and sort of blasphemous quote unquote scenes. Like, there was a scene that is infamously called the Rape of Christ, where a bunch of nuns take a Christ with Jesus cross with Jesus. Where they take a cross with Jesus Christ on it, and sort of they're making out with it, sort of, so this, because they're trying to pretend as though they're possessed, and so and there's a nun sort of like frenetically like rubbing a big candle with her hands in sort of like a masturbatory way, sort of thing. Like, it's like, and you have the priest looking on, like, really being disturbed and kind of turned on by it, and feeling guilty about it and all that stuff. And yeah, so the film was heavily cut at the time, and yeah, some of it has been restored, but not everything. So the Rape of Christ scene, I think it's not on the DVD that I have of the film though. So I guess that's still something that is not, that they don't want to put in there. So because it's sensitive, and yeah, because at the time, like, religious groups were really mad about it. Even though it actually makes a good argument about the separation of church and state. So that's always a very interesting debate to have. But I see that we are sort of approaching the 3 hour
Almost
mark.
3 hours, yeah.
Yeah, so I guess maybe we can finish. Maybe we can have a closing statement about the film as a whole. What we sort of think other people might be might take from it, maybe.
Oh, I can see your point. That's right. So the movie is still, I guess, popular to this day. So still finding new audiences as we speak, much like a lot of movies. So The Wizard of Oz is still finding audiences. Gone with the Wind, that's still finding new audiences today, and I think that's one of the best things about the advent of streaming, DVDs, the fact that you can still pick up these new movies from the past. So you can still pick up new movies from like DVD collections, like you were saying that you've got a big DVD collection yourself. That's back, I guess, back in the days of the original Fly, or maybe not at that point, but I do remember that certain movies from the 40s or 50s, they have now been destroyed, and that's right. So there are a huge number of movies that have been destroyed, or you won't be able to find available nowadays because the studios had to clear out the prints that they had. They didn't think that they would re-release those movies or be able to, because back then the cinema was the only thing they could do. The theatre was the only way to show these movies, and if they didn't find an audience the first time, they wouldn't be bringing them back to the theatre again.
But I hope that films like the original The Fly from 58 will be able to. I mean, that you will be able to find it. I haven't been able to find it anywhere, like in the DVD shops I usually go to, because most of the I mean, there's so many new films coming out every week. It's like they are much proud. They are much more interested in showcasing the newest product instead of ordering old classics that maybe might sell just as well, I guess, but not in their mind necessarily. But what I would say about the film is that it is actually the rarest of the rare. It was a readaptation or a remake, if you like that, if you prefer that term, that actually is a lot more nuanced than the original, and it's how a remake usually should be done, and in just slightly tweaking, or maybe have a completely different discussion in the new film, in the remake, than in the original. It's a big advocate for practical effects that I still hold up. Each time people tell me, why not make it CG, I always go like, you try to make this film CG, that's not gonna work. And obviously it's also one of the better performances of Jeff Goldblum, who after Jurassic Park sort of did his own thing, and that thing was not necessarily always good, but I like him a lot in this film, and I like Geena Davis, and I wish they had done more films together. I know that they did Earth Girls Are Easy, something like that, right? But that's a totally different. That's not serious at all. That's not a serious film whatsoever. But yeah, the
that's right.
Overall idea is, I guess, that I'd say, if people are interested in ideas about, metamorphosis and changing, like Ovid's poems, like this film harks back to all of those, and I think it might actually make you interested to discuss, have a serious conversation with people about serious themes and story elements, and I think that's why I think cinema is still great, because you can have a meaningful discussion.
That's right. I mean, the movie lures you in with this concept about a man that becomes a giant fly at the end of the movie, or fuses with a fly. But it's about, well, the big draw to the movie for me, like on repeat viewings, is the performances by the actors. So great performances by the actors. I enjoyed the story. I enjoyed the development of the characters. So it seems rare for, I guess, a modern horror film today wouldn't have the same type of development of the characters or attention to detail and storytelling like this movie does. So I think that's one of the big appeals to this movie for myself. And I do like, we talked about the influences that inspired the movie. Like, there's some influences of, I guess, maybe Twilight Zone episodes, or maybe old monster movies from the 50s or 60s that inspired this movie, and certainly King Kong as well, in the scene where I guess Brundlefly kidnaps Geena Davis, of course. But it's a great story about love, about jealousy, about the human condition, the slow progress or decaying of Brundle at the begining towards the very end, where he loses his skin, loses most of his body, loses feeling. His skin, his teeth, etc., and then eventually just loses everything and becomes a giant insect.
Yeah,
I think
it's probably also the fact that it's not a pleasant experience. It's not something like The Thing where you think, oh man, this is so great. These different transformations and stuff. Here it's like it's a slow process that is really that looks really painful.
And I think that the audience, all audiences that would be watching the movie, can relate to the characters or relate to Brundle as well. And it's certainly a concept that resonates with everyone that might be watching it.
It's certainly not something. I mean, I had at least when I watched it, I didn't want to watch it like immediately again. Even though I liked it enormously, and I think that's also something that people have to keep in mind. That it's a film that is not easy to digest. I mean,
oh yes,
it's something that you have to sort of let fester in your mind a little bit, and then you come back to it later on with a new perspective. And yeah, it's not something that you will be able to sort of say, oh well, let's just watch it, in the background, and do something else in the meantime, like and from time to time we're going to have a look at the screen. No, this is a film that actually engages you, at least viscerally, on a gut level somewhere. So
that's right. You better put away those emails when you're watching the movie.
Yeah, no, you probably should pay more. I mean, you should pay the film more respect than that, I guess, is what I would say. Yeah, so that's all I think I can say for now about the film. I hope. I mean, I hope that at least people who listen to this have enjoyed this discussions, even though we veered in and out of the topic. I mean, from time to time, but at the same time, that's what the VOK is for. Conscious.
That's right. It's about delivering, I guess, ideas or delivering new ideas. So despite the fact that there's already a lot of podcasts on the fly, and you can go elsewhere for podcasts on this particular film, it's I think that we've still brought new ideas that you can't find elsewhere. So I think that's one of the most important things. And certainly if you get into a new movie or a new series like I sometimes do, and sometimes I want to find as much as I can on that movie or TV show, so in terms of podcasts or reviews. So this would be another offering for you on what we both think about the movie, and hopefully you share the similar ideas.
Yeah. So on that note, I think we can probably call it a day.
That's right, we can end for now. I
Yeah.
guess it's midnight where you are
Yeah,
in
it's
Belgium.
12 right here. Yeah, midnight. And so for you, it's
That's right,
11.
11:15.
Yeah.
But thank you once again for agreeing to do this podcast with me.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, it's been a pleasure. And I would actually like to, to do this more often. Maybe we can have also maybe with if other people think they have a film maybe because I have created two topics on the VOK for for film discussions. Like I've offered some suggestions maybe on certain films. So if other people, if you maybe also
Oh
want to
yes.
talk about some of those, right? If you've seen them, maybe
Which
we can do
movies?
this again,
Well, I
right?
can certainly look it up. But any movies that you can think of just now? What
Oh,
movies did you suggest?
for example, I talked about it even in the thread about the Wolfcast. What's next for the Wolfcast? I
Oh
talked
yeah.
about the Company of Wolves that I've watched a couple of times, which I really enjoy because I call it like Wolfception, because it's like about dreams and werewolves and all that stuff. And then obviously we mentioned The Devils by Ken Russell, because I think the film had a lot of interesting ideas as well. Yeah, and you have all kinds of films in there. Big blockbusters. You have films like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and all
Oh,
that stuff.
excellent.
Yeah,
I
all
would
those
love to
films.
do that. The
Yeah,
Good,
I
the Bad,
also
and the Ugly.
yeah, that's a great western, but that's probably for another day. So
Yes, not
yeah,
today.
we will discuss it at some point, and we'll see if we can maybe get other people to join us as well.
That's right, we can certainly look into that. But
Yeah,
thank you once again, and hopefully everyone's enjoyed the episodes. So hopefully we can expect this episode as soon as possible. For depending on the other episodes that are being released at the moment. Thank you once again, Matthew, and thanks everyone for listening.
yeah.
That's
Bye,
it. Have a
everyone.
good day. Bye.
You too. Bye.
Have you watched The Fly 2?
The second one.
Yeah.
Not really. No, I've been told to stay away from that one. Yeah. I mean, because I know that there's the Return of the Fly, which is which is sort of a remake probably of the '58 version, but it came out in 1960, and then there's the Return, and then there's The Fly 2, which is a sequel to the 1986
Yes.
version. So it's I've just seen like reviews of The Fly 2, which all make fun of the fact that it is sort of it's a really inferior version of the first film in some ways, and then I guess I wasn't actually because usually when I watch a film, like I can't watch most films online basically.
Oh, okay.
Because I tend to buy I still buy DVDs, so it's like I don't try to buy films that I know aren't that good. So I don't watch like a lot of films that unless I find them online, and then sort of when it's a really bad film that everyone says, oh, you have to have seen that one. I probably would watch it then, but at the same time, it's I try to be selective in my choice.
I do have a TV subscription. It's with a UK company called Sky, and
okay.
so they've got this thing called Movies on Demand. So they've got this huge selection of movies. I think it's like 800 to 1,000. So that's how I watched The Fly. First of all, because I just found it through the TV subscription. But then, like a week ago, I thought, I wonder if they've got The Fly 2. So I was searching, found it there. So that's how I watched The Fly 2 as well.
Yeah, I know. I just found because as I said, I've seen reviews of it, and the scene where the dog sort of is.
Oh yeah.
That's just sort of the sad thing, and it makes. I mean, probably it's also a reason why the film wasn't well received, because it makes people feel bad. So it's, for the poor dog, that stuff. So but I've never seen it myself. Yeah, but and generally like I just tend to buy a lot of DVDs, and usually I buy them like at low prices somewhere in a small shops, because they don't have like huge prices and everything. So yeah, I guess I'm not that I'm sadly not like online. I'm not into streaming and all that stuff. I guess I don't have Netflix either. So it's mostly most of it I watch on my computer, like just my DVD, just in the CD player of my computer and stuff. But it's fine. Oh yeah, of course.
Start that off anyway.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, well, welcome to the. Let's see. I'll start it again.